Just like data of any other data type, we can totally pass a structure variable to a function or return a structure from a function. In this first slide, I'm going to show you that you could also pass members of a structure to a function. So for example, GPA was a double member of that student structure. So if I were going to pass the GPA member to this function called compute GPA, I would just need to make sure that compute GPA can accept a double variable. But I could also pass the entire structure variable to the function. And I'm pretending here that I have a student variable created that's called stu1. I'm sorry, just stu, not stu1. And to pass that, I'm just going to put the name of the structure variable. Now, structure variables are passed by value unless you use a reference parameter or pass the memory address and accept as a pointer. I have an example here that I'm going to go back to, but first I want to talk about returning structures from a function. You can return a structure from a function, and that would be the data type that you put as the return data type in your function prototype and also in your function header. And then when you actually call the function, if it returns a structure variable, you need to make sure you actually capture that return structure variable into a variable just like this. And so I'm going to show you this example as well. Struct func1 and struct func2. In this example, I have a structured declaration where my tag is inventory item. My members are an integer, part num, string, description, integer, how many of these particular inventory items I have on hand, and then the price of the inventory item. I then have my function prototype. So you always want to have your structured declaration prior to your prototypes, because otherwise these prototypes would not know what this data type is. GetItem passes the structure variable by reference, and I know that because of the ampersand here. And showItem passes the inventory item by value. In the main function, I create an inventory item called part, and then I call the getItem function sending part to this function by reference. So P is an alias for part. So every time you see P, you're going to think that's part. I ask the user for the part number and I read that into the part num member. And then I ask for the description, read that into the description member, and then on hand, and then price. Then this function ends and I go back to the main function where I then call showItem, sending part by value. I don't need to make changes to the inventory item variable, and so sending by value makes sense. All this function is going to do is print out the part num description on hand and price to the screen. Let's take a look at this program running. Struct func_1.cpp. Oh, let's say this is a couch, and I have 19. And these couches are $1,298.54. And then it just print it all back out to the screen. So just remember, if you don't pass by reference, then any changes you make to that structure variable in that function will not be applied to the calling function. So if you want the changes to be applied to the variable in the calling function, you need to pass by reference. Okay, let's take a look at struct func2. This example shows a structure called circle, which has a radius, diameter, and area. My function prototype is Circle is our return type, and getInfo. So this getInfo function is going to return a circle. This also shows you an example of an initialization list with a structure variable. It looks quite like an array initialization list. So what this will do right here in this line is we'll create a circle variable called C, and it will initialize the radius, diameter, and area to 0. Note that this goes in order. So if I were to put like something like 5 here and 7 here, just so I can distinguish between the three, the radius would be set to 0, diameter would be set to 5, and area would be set to 7. But for this program, I just wanted all three of these to be initialized to 0. And then I call the getInfo function. In the getInfo function, I create a temporary circle called tempCircle. I ask the user for the diameter, and then I calculate the radius by taking the diameter and dividing by 2, and then I return that circle. I capture the circle back into C. So I want to make sure that you understand exactly what's happening here, because there's something that's a little bit weird about this program. In the main function, when I create C, I initialize I want to make sure I get this in the right order, the radius to 0, the diameter to 0, and the area to 0. However, whenever I call the function getInfo, I create a tempCircle, but I don't initialize any of tempCircle's members. So what that means is tempCircle, which is a totally different circle in memory, that also contains a radius, which is not initialized, so it just has junk data in it, diameter, which also just has junk data in it, and then area, which just has junk data in it. But then I ask the user enter the diameter of the circle. So let's say that the user enters in one of my favorite numbers, which is 7. Then it calculates the radius. Let's use an even number just to make this easier. Let's say the diameter was 8, and then the radius is 8 divided by 2, so that's going to make radius 4. But look, area is still junk data. So then when I return tempCircle, what happens is this circle replaces this one. And so now C is going to be equal to 4, 8, and I'm going to draw junk data as a squiggly line. And of course, tempCircle goes away when this function ends. So although area initially was set to 0, it's now junk data. And one thing, I have this commented out, but let's uncomment it out, because I want you to see that after we call getArea or getInfo, area will be this junk data. Then I'm going to calculate the area, and then I will print out the radius and the area of that circle. Okay, so let's run this program. G++ struct func_2.cpp. I'm going to clear the screen and run it. So 8, the diameter of the circle is 8, then the area was junk data, which you see is like this crazy number. If you were to do this on your program, on your computer, you get a different number here. It just happens to be whatever's in my memory in that space where that was created. But then it does get updated because we calculate the area based off of the radius, and it ends up being 50.27.